Live here from the Oral Toys studio, and it's the Oral Toys show, so we're gonna talk about anything Star Wars. Well, this week we've got a series of videos, and well, in case you're wondering, just a sneak peek at one of them, and it's the exact same thumbnail tomorrow, so don't be alarmed if you see that one premiering because it's a much different video with the exact same thumbnail. Should I take a different one? I don't know. I just had that one handy, so I thought I'd use it for this stream, since it is very fitting to what you're looking at live on camera right now. Well, Star Wars The Mandalorian and Grogu is performing decently. Not the worst, but also not the best, but it's definitely a movie that's may it's been slowing down, but as all movies do after opening weekend, so it's going pretty good right now. Still going decently strong into what is this weekend. Far into weekend 2. In other words, the editor for Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back, and Star Wars Return of the Jedi has sadly passed away, Marshall Lucas. And as many of you have heard, Star Wars, it was an absolute it was a terrible movie before Marshall Lucas came in and cleaned it up. It was just a mess. It was, nothing made sense. And, well, all three Star Wars movies were saved in the editing room. So, Marshall Lucas, one of the most important people in giving us Star Wars. So, there's our tribute to her. I think that's about it for Star Wars news, really. So, 2 minutes of news, really? I mean, we could have maybe uh, not too many more stories other than, you know, I think we're close to San Diego Comic Con. And I'm very curious what Hasbro will give us for our next new big HasLab, because I'm really thinking that that's going to be at San Diego Comic Con. And I can guess it's going to be something Star Wars related, because Star Wars, it'll be arriving at Star Wars' 50th anniversary, because they are pre-orders. For me to back it, it would have to be a Yavin base. I don't think I would back a Death Star. And the reason why is because Kenner gave us a Death Star, and it's a great Death Star. I'm happy with my Death Star. So I would like a Yavin base. That's what I would truly back. And I would also, a Lars Homestead. I would back that. I would rather have a vintage Sandcrawler than one Hasbro would make, if I'm being honest. I would, if it's the Millennium Falcon, it's not gonna get past the pre-order stage, because Hasbro's already made a big Millennium Falcon, and I think I'm happy with my Kenner Falcon. I think that's really it for the big things, at least. The one Death Star thing, though, if they did a trench scene, I would back that, but that's definitely out of the picture, since these are meant for action figures, not for the big vehicles. But also, where would I put it? Yeah, that's really it. And then for Empire, I would 100% back an Echo base. 100%. For Jedi, Kenner really gave us all the big things for Jedi, although an Emperor's Throne Room would be cool, but I don't think I would back that. But yeah, I would love a Yavin base for sure. Or maybe, well, my Vader's tie backdrop is a good enough Imperial hangar bay for me, at least. Maybe, of course, there's some person that's like, well, that it never came from the movie. Well, yeah, of course, and that's why it's cool, because that's the only way you're going to get that image and that kind of set. It's just unique. Oh, for Empire Strikes Back, I would also back a Cloud City because I don't know what if most states in the U.S., including Hawaii, including Hawaii, because there are pretty tall mountains in Hawaii that do receive snow. And as somebody who has personally been to Hawaii and been on top of one of those very tall mountains, the island of Maui, I can confirm that there is snow in Hawaii. At least certain times a year. The West Coast gets snow. Really, the only states that don't get snow are Arizona and Florida. Well, Florida actually did. Well, now that I think about it, every state does get snow. Because Arizona does have some mountains, and I have Grand Canyon gets snow. So, you know, but my point is that we went on a rampage about which states get snow. Every state, I believe, gets snow. Some states in the South don't, or it's a rare occurrence at least in the South. But the reason why I bring that up is because Kenner didn't really give us a ton of Tatooine stuff, or because Kenner knew that a lot of kids had a sandbox in their backyard, and they could just instead of giving us a you know kind of a base. Hello there, yes, hello Jibber Jabber action figure. So Kenner knew that sandboxes would make a great environment for Tatooine because it's sand and stuff like that. And Kenner was not that wise with Empire Strikes Back because Empire Strikes Back they gave us a ton of Hoth toys, because snow is not a permanent environment, and so they gave us a lot of Hoth toys. And I'm gonna say this: they gave us too many because I don't think we needed a cardboard AT-AT, and the Rebel Command Center that was a Sears exclusive, that wasn't a store release. And the attack base and turret and probot, those are enough Hoth sets for me, but of course I've got to collect them all, so I've got to collect those other two Hoth sets. And I've I'm blanking on something here. Dagobah, the Dagobah set is 100% amazing for as far as Kenner Star Wars goes. And Kenner executed the job with Dagobah great, you know, and then they filled up too much on Hoth and they left no room for Bespin. Sears gave us the little cardboard backdrop. You had two Bespin security guards. Han, Luke, and Leia each had a Bespin version. Boba Fett frequently featured on Bespin. X-Wings landed there, Slave One landed there. For all people that grew up with the special edition, you could put your shuttle there. But somebody who has never seen the originals, but knows enough about them, I do know the Imperial shuttle did not land on Bespin, and Falcon landed there. You got Lando, all the the Cloud Car, everything for Bespin, but no playset. And whether that was because Bespin was a darker part of the movie, but I think I know why. And it's because Bespin, the lightsaber fight was the only piece of action that took place there. It wasn't a big battle. It was just, a lightsaber fight. Luke and Leia running, or Leia and Lando running from the Imperials, just, blasting their way through the halls. It was a lot of walking and running around the hallways. Not really much more to it than that. And so I think when Kenner was designing playsets, they were just like, well, Hoth has a lot of action. And Luke's doing stuff. He's out there blowing up AT-ATs. The snow speeders are taking down AT-ATs. There's a lot of shooting. So he gave us that. And then the Star Destroyer, for as even though it doesn't look like a Star Destroyer, does the Death Star look like the Death Star? No, it looks like a little wedge out of it. And I think they went for something similar with the Star Destroyer. And with the Star Destroyer, you either love it or you hate it. And there's a snow in the middle. The Star Destroyer is the Star Destroyer. It's a great playset. As far as displayability, you can set your figures up on it. But if you're going for a model or something that looks accurate, if you're going for accuracy, and I think this is where toy collectors get a little bit over their skis, because these aren't models, these are toys. And if you're going for like, toy collectors keep complaining, and it always kind of bugs me when they do this, where they're like, oh, well, the sand person had this little piece of wrapping is, yeah, it's slightly off. They could have done that better. Who cares? They're toys. They're meant for kids. And it always bugs me when people do that. If you're looking for one-to-ones, then you should invest in some models, and then you can make them how you would like them. So for my I have built a couple of models. I have built the Falcon, the Death Star, and I have a small Star Destroyer, and I have a bigger Star Destroyer with fiber optics that I do want to build. And it's it's a no, the fiber optics really make it authentic. And yeah, if you're going for detail, go with models. If you're going for a more simplistic look, then go with the toys, because you know at this point Hasbro has turned into more of a. I know, I'm gonna say it though. Hasbro is they're kind of walking the line between, is it a toy or is it a model? And they're walking that fine line because they come with accessories. Do you have diecast Star Destroyer? I want that toy. I do. But the only diecast stuff I have is the Cloud Car and the Darth Vader's TIE Fighter. My Darth Vader's TIE Fighter is absolutely mint. And my Cloud Car, well, where'd it go? It's here. My Cloud Car's in decent shape. It's a little chipped up, but it's not battered. It's just a couple of scuffs here and there. It was flown around the house. And diecast is actually, well, maybe not a false advertisement, but the Cloud Car, the bottom of it is plastic, and then on the top it's metal. And then with the TIE Fighter, the wings are plastic, and the only part that's actually metal is the TIE Fighter ball. So I think it's a, but no, these are actually, these are more models because see the little heads in there? This is what they would have used in the movie. It's just flying there, you can see it. So, one of my dreams though is because of that and because Kenner did a great job with the little heads on the inside. My dream is to assemble a not a huge thing of them, but a decent number of, TIE fighters, X-Wings, whatever. Yeah, they're not to scale. None of this stuff was in the original Star Wars. The thing with movie making that I found is nothing was really to scale. You had big models, you had small models. So, what it's all about the angle. The Star Destroyers were, you know, they were decently big, but they weren't huge. And the way they achieved the look was with a different camera angles. If you want something to look big, you film it from closer up. If you want it to look small, film it from farther away. And so my dream is to create kind of, assemble a nice amount of those diecast vehicles. Diecast Falcon is also metal on top, plastic underneath. Yeah, I would have expected that. But so my dream is to assemble a good group of those and, have it, film a little battle scene. I've done that with, if you guys watched my May 4th video, Star Wars Rise of the Empire, Luke Strikes Back. A lot of positive stuff on that one because people say, yeah, this is exactly how I played with my toys. And, yeah, no, just kind of bringing back some of those old memories there for a lot of people. And I want to do that, but on a more professional level. And instead of really playing with them, breaking out my gray screen and, putting a little table with a gray shirt or something on it. And, actually making it look like they're in space and, adding laser blasts to the scene and just making it look really nice. That's is what I want to do. Just making it look absolutely great. Great and something that, you could because and Jibber Jabber action figure, did you know this? So because George Lucas liked these so much, the white TIE fighter diecast ship was a prop, a little miniature that was used in Return of the Jedi. So some of these ships were so great that George Lucas said, "Yeah, we'll throw them in the movie." So if I get a white TIE fighter, and I'm not gonna, pay $3 million for the exact one that was used and the exact frame of Return of the Jedi, but if I can pick up a nice one, and it's gonna be a screen accurate version, and so much so that I will have a not reproduction, but it's like buying a Graflex. So you have the thing they used for Luke's lightsaber, but you don't actually have the Luke's lightsaber that was screen used. So it's having some that they might have sat on a table, but they didn't put that one on the stand, if you know what I'm saying, and Mark Hamill sand or whatever. But so yeah, so some of the diecast white TIE fighters are 100% screen accurate, down to the finest little marks on them. And of course, and we know this because Lucas said, yeah, I did use those. And there is a picture of George Lucas standing in a room full of little props. And, on the table right next to him, there's just a whole bunch of those little white white diecast TIE fighters. A lot of people didn't know that. A lot of people don't. I should really do a video on that. And then, oh, here's another cool rant we can go on. You know what a Toy Tony is? Toy Tonys. Those are pretty cool. And if you don't know what they are, I did not know that. Yeah. No, so yeah, those little white TIE fighters are pretty rare. But yeah, no, a Toy Tony. Those are. Oh, I didn't know I could do that. Well, that makes my life a whole lot easier. But yeah, no, the Toy Tonys are. There's this guy in somewhere in Europe, I think, maybe UK. And after Star Wars was done, and this is like the best bootlegging ever done. So he goes around, to garage sales and stuff, and he buys the figures complete in in good condition. So he cherry picks and he buys up all of the good figures with the accessories. And what he did was he dumpster dove at Palatoys. In Palatoy's dumpster, he grabbed thousands of card backs and blisters. And he takes these all home, and he's just, nobody knows how he did it. And he's just piecing he's putting the figure with the accessory, and he's sealing them for the first time, so they're unsealed card backs. And he's been sealing them, and and there's thousands of them out there. And so what he's doing, and to keep funding it, he sells them as legitimate. And it's he did such a great job that top grading companies like AFA, they genuinely believed they were the real thing. And of course, word kind of got out. He kind of, spit it out a little bit like, "Oh yeah, I did that a while back. I made my own carded figures with the real counter figures." So it's all legitimate stuff. Nothing is fake. It's just the seal on the card back is fake. So it's not a real carded figure, but the bubble, the card back, and the figure and the accessory are all 100% real. So if you see a really high graded Palatoy figure, and we're talking like 90, and he only used the mintest card backs and the mintest bubbles he could find. And well, I don't know, he just grabbed them, but he might have gotten the best stack. And yeah. And we know roughly how many there are out there. I don't know that number off the top of my head. I'll have to do a video on that, but yeah, Toy Tonys. Those are some pretty cool items right there. Now let's do a time check. 3:41. Well, we'll go for another 10 minutes. 10 minutes or so. Run at a half hour. And I think we'll call it a show. Well, that's the end of that rant. We just kind of spilling over rant after rant. We're just eating up time. Because I gotta get to something at 5 and want to wrap up a little. I want to be getting ready around 4. I had time earlier today, but I just never thought until right before I got on to do a stream. But yeah, no. Oh, this summer it's gonna be the summer of Your Old Toys live streams. I can guarantee that. There's going to be a live stream just about every day from me. And some people are going to call me a little crazy for trying to do this, but I believe a list was made saying which MOCs Tony made up. Well, so there's for sure a list of, you know, they're mostly Return of the Jedi figures, or Return of the Jedi card backs. And so, well, because they used up all the Empire cards, they used up all of the, a lot of the cards. Who knows? And what wound up happening was the, what do you call it? So, because, so the factories used up all the Star Wars and Empire cards, so there might be a handful of those out there. But, you know, and, he may have done such a great job that he could have been doing that long before the 90s with Star Wars and Empire cards. It very well could have happened, but these are only we know roughly. But yeah, Toy Tonys. I would love to have one in my collection, but those are the greatest bootlegs ever done. And of course, there'll be somebody someday that watches this and says, "Oh, well, Uzes are always better." Well, Uzes were borderline bootlegs, but you know they're kind of now considered main mainline collectibles and vintage Star Wars, whereas Toy Tonys are legitimate bootlegs. He knocked them off. He took real stuff and you know he he convinced people that they were legitimately carded, which of course, well, if he had done that with last 17s and stuff like that, they would be a far more rare. But um, the Return of the Jedi, they were just cranking that stuff out, so it would be harder to find stuff from Empire and Star Wars that Tony did. But yeah, no, I would love to have one of those in my collection. And 3 viewers, wow. We're really going to get our watch time up today. But yeah, so this summer, we're going to have a stream right about every day. Every day I'm here in the studio, pretty much, which will be most days. And then some days I'll have to go, vacation with the family, do stuff like that. Be away for a week, do all the other things. But yeah, most days, well, there'll be a stream. And this summer, I'm going to attempt a 24-hour stream. He assembled them with authentic parts. I believe it was discovered around 2013. So do you mean he actually broke into Palatoy and stole their their uh, bubble mounting machine where the thing that, has the steam that shoots it onto the card, heats up the glue, glues it on, that makes that little waffle pattern. I think, yeah, I didn't know that. I just know, kind of the basic outline. And I learned this literally last weekend. Something I didn't even know. But yeah, I'm even still learning stuff. He purchased the part using a clothing iron. Oh, he purchased the parts and used a clothing iron, yeah. Yeah, no. Well, so, so I know he had to purchase the figures, and I know he had to but But I'll do a lot more research and I'll make a video on it. We're at 30 minutes though, so we're doing pretty great. 3 viewers watching. We're doing good. Palatoy sold the cards and oh, I you know if I could go back, man, if I could go back with this much knowledge, I would be filling. I would buy a house if I could go back with, let's say $1 billion. I would buy a house in a nice enough neighborhood, and it would. Well, no, I would buy a house in the country, so that way there's nobody breaking in and stuff like that, or a lesser likelihood. I mean, if the parts are real, it's authentic. Well, that's a little bit debated though, because the figure's authentic, the card's authentic, but then would you consider an opened figure? He could have just sold the card backs as proofs for more. Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah, there was though so um I believe, and I've heard multiple stories about this, that you could write letters to Kenner requesting accessories. And I know a couple people that did this, and they actually received the accessories. So they were assembled, yeah. So, you know. But so yeah, just to have all of those accessories just all there, at that if I would have wrote a million letters to Kenner requesting, all the accessories, because you can make a lot of accessories faster than you can make figures, because the figures you have to paint, and the only painted accessory I believe was the Gamorrean Guard Axe and the Emperor's Cane. They did not mold that in black plastic. It was molded in a white plastic. And I know that because the paint on my Emperor's Cane is starting to chip. Kind of right at the handle where he... Back in the 80s, my mom talked to Kenner to get us lightsabers and guns. We lost. We got some Hoth metal figures. Yeah. I mean, I wrote in, got a whole TIE fighter, of course. Later, I destroyed that fighter as well. Oh yeah, no. The the friend I buy my stuff from, Mad Max over at Heroes and Hobbies. He, for one of his I think 5th grade English class, I don't remember the whole story, but for a school assignment, he wrote a letter, to Kenner requesting, because you were practicing making a letter. So he wrote the letter, and he had it written requesting, specific amounts of accessories. And, these were, and it would say like the Stormtrooper blaster, or the blaster that came with the Stormtrooper, the gun that came with the ATST driver, and so it's just specific amounts. And it was because his friend told him, and what wound up happening was he said, "Oh, it's got to be a joke. There's no way this is real." So the letter sat in his drawer. And then, he just never sent it. And then there's all these accounts later nowadays that it actually did work. And there are some accounts of people writing Kenner asking for you know pre-production stuff, and by that they mean like what figures of what you're gonna release next, and there's some accounts of that. Of course, nobody really knows if it's true or if they just bought it later on, but you can always write a good old letter and see what happens. Just like, um, you know, if you had the addresses to the big, to the sports headquarters, or the sports team's headquarters. I had only requested a TIE fighter part, but they just sent a whole TIE fighter. Yeah, hey, you could have got some of that going on too. Yeah, which TIE fighter? The regular white one or Battle Damage, TIE Interceptor, Darth Vader's TIE fighter? There's a ton of different TIE fighters. But yeah, you know, what you should have done is said, "Oh, can you send me the white?" Yeah. You should have asked and said, "Oh, can you send me the gun to the Imperial shuttle?" They would have said, "Oh, well, we'll just send him his shuttle." Or, "Oh, can you send me the?" I still have the catalogs and request forms. So yeah, I've got a catalog right here. Star Wars collections, but that's an Empire Strikes Back image, so it's kind of weird. On the back is the fan club membership. But yeah, I've got a couple of catalogs. Nothing too special, but they are catalogs. And I've got a planetary map, so that is also a decent one. I was 9 years old and wasn't that sophisticated to ask for stuff, really awesome stuff. Yeah. And okay, could you imagine, you send letters and ask for a part to the skiff just to do it, and you know because on all, what did it say, on all of the Kenner catalogs, or on all of the instructions sheets, we really do care. I actually bought a sealed Kenner figure from the Lucas Arts catalog in the late 90s, pretty cheap. Yeah. Yeah, no, but all the instruction sheets said, we really do care. And I'll actually pull out my Jabba the Hutt instructions. Um, and we'll do a reading of it. Just see what it really does. It'll take me a moment to get this out of the kind of little case I have my instructions in. And so now I'm just realizing now why I put it in there, and it's because when I received it, it was, it's doing the thing that paper does, where whether it's bugs or just the air getting to it'll kind of, get a couple of, it'll, thin out in a few places like that. But we really do care. We make each toy with tendering, loving care. If there's a problem with your toy as you receive it, please let us know. Simply describe the problem and mail that description along with your name and address to Kenner Products, Consumer Relations Department, 1014 Vine Street, Cincinnati, Ohio 45202. So, yeah, you could have just described random problems like, oh, the Falcon cockpit is one of the the cockpit plastic piece is cracked, and oh, the Imperial shuttle, the 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 all the guns are the tips are broken off of them, or oh, the Death Star, all this, two of the struts are missing. It just random problems, and they would have just sent you stuff, backups, whatever. But yeah, no, all of that good stuff. Well, let's see how we're doing on time here. Well, it's been a great show. Wow, cool. Oh yeah. Yep. I got to get more instructions though. That's the one department I'm kind of lacking in. I could, what are they? 10, $20 for a sheet. So, it also depends on the sheet too. Like, skiff is a rare one. I just love my skiff. Even though I can't really see it right now. I can't really ever see it though, cause of where it's positioned though. Cause I have a shelf that it kind of runs like a track around my studio, and cause I have two rooms. As if you've been watching the show for a while, you know I have two rooms, and I actually started out in the bigger room, the second room, but it was kind of difficult for me to come back here. It was kind of a pain for me to come back here, grab the thing, go over there, set it up. So it was just really a pain to do that for, reviews or even live streams. That's why I didn't like to live stream a lot in the beginning. And, now that I can just, my headset cord's long enough to where I can get to 90% of stuff in here. And then I've got a few things out there, but not too many. Like the Death Star's the biggest thing out there. And then I've got, 95% of all my figures in here. You know. But yeah, I think that's about it for the show. Well, we got another stream coming up next week. I haven't decided on the date yet, but yeah, I'm trying to do one stream a week along with 5 videos a week. I have tomorrow's video all filmed, so stay tuned for that if you haven't already. And you want to see more amazing live streams, more amazing Star Wars content, and just really anything vintage Kenner Star Wars or Star Wars related, please remember to hit that subscribe button. And if you want to, show your support, you said, wow, Your Old Toys did a great job today. And we really do enjoy, him. We enjoyed watching the show today. Hit that like button. Yeah, see a Jibber Jabber action figure. And, well, ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap. If you haven't already, please remember to like the live stream, subscribe to the channel, and we will talk again soon.
I grew up with Star Wars, living life like a kid, and many years later I found my Hoth base, buried in a box, vintage figures hidden in a case, from the Death Star to Echo Base, to the asteroids and Yavin Base. Star Wars is cool, and that's a fact, but there's a fan out there, and he's covering it all. And Your Old Toys is running the show, and he's a Your Old Toys, and that's all I know. And Your Old Toys has come so far from a Star Wars collector to a YouTube star, and I'm coming back to Star Wars because he is a Your Old Toys, and that's all I know. And Your Old Toys is running the show, and they're calling you back to Star Wars because Your Old Toys running the show. Shout out to all the subscribers that wanna see him grow. And from Tatooine sand to Hoth's cold ground, Endor's forest spinning all around. Your old toys running the show, and that's the only life you will ever know. And he's a your old toys, and that's all I know. Your old toys is running the show. I am coming to Star Wars again because he's your old toys, and that's all I know. And if you're looking for a stream, there is no plan B. Your old toys has got you covered. If there was a guy that said, do you wanna see my Star Wars collection? I am trying to spread my knowledge on the subject. I know a guy, his name is Your Old Toys. Do not confuse him with my new toys. And he is a Your Old Toys, and that's all I know. Your Old Toys is running the show, and I am coming back to Star Wars because he is a Your Old Toys, and that's all I know. Because he is a Your Old Toys, and that's all I know. Because he is a Your Old Toys.